Welcome, listeners. I am again so blessed with a guest on my podcast. Will Berrigan is here with us. He is a wealth advisor, president of Shamrock Wealth Management. And I think, Will, I met you several years ago in a mediation course. And, I think I was so drawn to Will because you're such a family guy and you talked about your family so lovingly. And then you didn't take yourself too seriously. And I'm like, who's this financial wizard who's kind of easy to talk to? So when I was mediating and I had some clients that had a really complicated financial plan, I thought, hey, I'm going to call in Will. And I brought him into the mediation. And I mean, Will can actually make finances kind of fun and you are calming. And so I had new value on Will after that first, mediation session. Now I always want to use Will when I have something complicated. And in fact, I trust him so much that I told my husband, you got to meet this guy. And we've never had a wealth advisor, and we now have Will and are so thankful. And Will, I've got to tell you, when we met with you, it was a little bit of a healing moment. We're not going through a divorce.
Right.
It wasn't a mediation session. But as I was sitting there, I think I said something kind of flippant to my husband that got his goat. And I was like, oh, Will's mediating for us right now. And you you brought his view into perspective for me. And after that, I mean, months after, I think it kind of hit me one day that it's okay that we have two different views on our finances. That's okay. And obviously you usually do when you're going through a divorce, but even when you're married, you can. And I think I gave value to, you know what, my idea is okay too. I had a conversation with my husband and I said, I'm not mad at you anymore. It's okay that you feel the way you do. I'm not going to try to change you. I mean, I think you'd be a lot happier if you lived the way I do, but you do your thing. So you did one of those things where you healed a piece of our marriage, and I don't think you even knew it. So I think you really have a natural ability towards working. You're kind of a counselor with people. And so that just leads me to, Will, how did you get into this, wealth advisory world?
Well, first of all, I'm still reeling from the compliment about that because your husband, John, is such a great person. And, when you're sitting across two people that are fantastic and they're both smart and loving and caring, it's easy to take in both points of view and be respectful of those. But I think the reason I got into it, and just to give some clarity, I really have two companies. I have the wealth management company, and then I have the divorce planning company. And the reason that I did that is really kind of twofold. Number one is when you get into this business in the first place and you have some success and you keep moving, there's this, for me personally, there was this gnawing feeling of I want to help people in a more direct and intimate way and really help people that are vulnerable. And one of the tricks of, trying to do that is in the financial world, you're helping people who have a lot of money. There isn't on the surface a lot of vulnerabilities there. And so divorce caught my eye. I'd known some people involved in it, met some divorce attorneys that I thought were really great people. And so I think that was a big part. The other thing too is I love my wife, I love my children, but I also know the ebb and flow of a spousal relationship, especially when you live with me. I tend to be a catalyst for the ebb part. My wife is the flow part. It's funny because we were laughing the other day. My wife and I went through some therapy a long time ago and got some help. And the metaphor that the therapist used was, you guys, Bridget, you're the kite and Will's the string. And I heard that and I kind of was like, well, what if I want to be the kite? I don't want to spend my adult life being the string. Why does she get to fly around in the wind? So anyway, I know how vulnerable marriages are. I know how great they can be for a family, but I also know that at some point it's time to move on and seek renewal. Through my whole life, one of the key things is each day provides small and large renewals. And for me, helping people through divorce is less about an ending and more about let's get both people prepared for a big renewal.
Yep. And, and that is so, I think that it's so in line because I kind of am starting to coach people more, and I want to coach them to a better future. They were doing the things they were doing to get to where they are. And so the whole point of this podcast really is to help people feel less afraid when they're going through a divorce. And I think the biggest fear is the financial worries. I mean, that would definitely be mine. And it's really hard for people to prepare their budget. Sometimes that's the hardest thing to get people to do. And sometimes I have to sit with them and go through it step by step, from a sheet. And then just for people to understand that when you're married, you own everything together, unless it's a non-marital asset. And sometimes that's hard. This is my 401k, my name's on it. And no, that isn't the way it works in divorce. And so, we have to start splitting things up. And you've helped me with that on complicated cases. But do you have some tools and tips to help people that are going through a divorce to feel a little more calm? Because you are a calming guy.
There's really, thank you for that. And you should know too, the best way I can describe it is you handle your mediations with this kind of perpetual grace. You get these bursts of great, welcoming laughter. You got such a great laugh and a great smile, but you're also very understanding. And then in the context of all that, one of the things I can get trapped up into in the kind of marinating the whole room in compassion and understanding is that the things can slow down. It becomes too much of a feeling session. You maintain the dignity of keeping that, but you're always moving the conversation forward. It's a great skill, and it's why you're a great mediator. So I just want
to make sure
you know that. They're really, and anybody who's listening and it sees this and wants to, they can just send me information. But there's at the beginning, there's this little book that I have. It's just called Smarter Divorce Secrets, and it's tiny, just handed out. And it really just kind of goes through when you think about, a little bit about divorce, the emotional impact, and then how to maybe the choices to use, like mediation, and then just some financial mistakes at the beginning to avoid.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Who's the author of that?
Well, this is something that I've accumulated together, over time. So I've parsed.
Is this your book, Will?
Yeah. So I've got my name on the book, and this is produced by us, and so we can send them out.
Oh, I love that, and I would love to get my hands on that. Not to diverse, but we're going to put your website in the show notes so people can click on. But your blogs are amazing. They're just fun to read no matter what.
Oh, good. Yeah.
So I'm really interested in that book. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, this is probably a little less, there's a little less there's fewer muses in this book, I would say. This is more like a grocery list. But then I think the other thing, of course, then you go through the process, and it's really, I think the big thing is make sure you have all the data available. And if you don't have it, have a good idea of what it is, and then through that time work it through. The problem with kind of doing a ballpark when you go through that, it's a good first discussion, but when you really are going through mediation, you absolutely need to have documents for all of the material. And I would say that if you're thinking about divorce and this is an issue, begin to accumulate that sooner rather than later. So documents are key. obviously that's the main thing. And then the initial discussions, understand what you want out of the divorce in concert with your spouse financially, just to say, how do we want to divide this up? What's important? The house. A lot of times there's two spouses when finances are complicated. You have one high earner and one who's not as high of an earner. So how do you split assets to be tax efficient? Those are things that, you help people with, I can help people with.
Right.
But the only way to figure all of that out is to make sure you have the documents. So the number one thing, if you're really moving forward with the divorce, get all the documents and have them pretty current. And then I would say, and this is just jumping around a little bit, we can talk about it in the middle of it, but some post-divorce tips that I think people kind of forget about. You go through the pain of building into a divorce. There's a certain amount of grief associated with that. And one thing that's really been a surprise for me in working with divorced couples, and that I really love, and it's a combination of really seeing people where they are, is, if I think of love as kind of a curve, like this. You start off and you meet, and then it grows and grows, and you reach an apex, and hopefully you can maintain that apex with some up and downs along the way. But at some point that floor can break through and the marriage breaks down. But what's interesting, even though the marriage is breaking down, one, if not both of the people in the marriage, they're still on the love curve. There's still love there when you're going through that. And that's always a little sad to witness as a third party. But you also can see that it's okay to acknowledge that. It's okay to step into an ending for that, even though you might carry some of that energy after the divorce is over.
Absolutely.
But it's time to focus on renewal. So I think what happens is you get through that, and then post-divorce, you kind of forget some stuff, and there's some key things that I might just share right now that I think people need to keep in mind after they get through it, some post-divorce.
And that is so important and interesting. My good friend Annie Brose, an attorney, was on last week. But if you want to recap, that's going to be helpful, because I get paranoid that people are going to forget to take care of business when the divorce is done.
Yeah.
So what are those things?
Well, I won't go through a lot. I'll just make it real quick. But, sit down with somebody, either yourself or sit down with someone, get your financial statement in order once everything's done. Like, look at what assets do I have? What liabilities do I have? How did it all shake out? Organize your financial records and have a person, because you don't have a spouse anymore, at least for the time being, that you trust, that knows where all your financial information is in case something would happen. You also want to establish a savings plan. You may be paying down debt, but you still need to put savings in. If you're working for a company, make sure that you're in the 401k and you're at least doing the match there. Simplify your money life. A lot of banks, you can do, if you haven't been in charge of the finances before, they provide a lot of data, but they also can help you do bill pay automatically. And then your credit is important. Do things to improve that. Any insurance policies or retirement plans, make sure you get the beneficiaries changed. You don't want to have that go to someone that you don't, that you're not married to anymore, right? Retitle property if you need to. So if you own the home yourself now, that needs to happen. Just always check on the status of the settlement if there's a quadro, which happens if you move retirement assets for people. And, and talk to someone about whether you need to have insurance coverage. Would that be a credible thing to do? And then I've got literally those are kind of the main financial planning pieces, but just kind of chores that need to be done. I've got a list of 25 different things that people need to make sure they have. I won't go through them all, but some of them as simple and even maybe non-necessary as buying a shredder, to if you've got a safety deposit box, that you've got to make sure that the right people have the keys and backup, all of those kind of things. So I think those are just nothing's too small, I guess, at the end of a divorce to pay attention to, but your credit is one, and you don't want to be on a credit card with your ex-spouse. So
Right.
make sure that gets changed, and that's put in the, kind of the divorce decree or the memorandum of understanding when you're doing
So I love this. I love this. That's why this is such a blessing, this podcast, because we're helping the listeners. But so after Annie, I compiled a list so that I can give it to my clients. And now I've got some things I can add because you definitely are coming.
Oops, sorry, I interrupted.
No, go. You're coming from a different angle. And so I want to share that with people so that they don't forget anything. And we kind of ask them to start doing it during the divorce, because when you're all done with the divorce, you really want to be all done. So I really encourage people to, get their quadros in order, get their deeds ready. They can start doing their financial work as if they were single.
Yeah. And, the other thing, depending upon where somebody's coming from, maybe they do or do not want the divorce as much as the other spouse, and maybe they weren't involved in the finances. You start going through the list and throw out words like quadro and 401k, and all of these, stocks and bonds and, compounded interest. And all of a sudden you've just assaulted a human being and all of this stuff. And you're like, I can't take it anymore.
Right.
So one of the things that I think is helpful, because it does become this albatross, and it can create kind of this inaction, or maybe oversimplification and not looking at the details, is putting these in checklist form. So you have something written down to do, and you can check it off. Yep. Like, wait, what did that mean again? Oh, I have to establish a new budget, and I was going to cut expenses. And I'm going to use a debit card to control spending. So I'm going to get this separate debit card, and I got to call and do that. Or, I got to make sure I contact my spouse's company to get COBRA health insurance coverage.
Right.
So you just, those go through, and you're kind of like, sometimes you don't really readdress these issues that you kind of go over in the mediation until you need the COBRA coverage and you don't have it, and you got to scramble to get it.
Yep.
So
great tip.
Yeah. And then the last thing I would say too is that the plans that you do after your death, so your estate plan, now that you're not married anymore, you need to revisit that with someone.
Yep. I agree. So as far as when I have clients coming in, I have a really in-depth intake form that they love to fill out.
Of course they do.
But it's so helpful because it helps them start to get a handle on what they have.
Yeah.
And then so that's really important. And then I always think the budget is so telling, and it's so hard for people to think into the future. They don't really, some of them don't know where they're going to live. And so they don't know. And so we kind of punt because we have to come up with a number to start talking about, if there's maintenance needed. So I think those budgets are so important too. Moving forward, a renewal with their life, what I've been kind of telling myself in my own head is that money is easy. It isn't that hard. I think I was always under the understanding that it was, but it's just basically seeing what you have to spend. And then we've got to make sure you have enough income to cover it.
Yeah. I mean, that at its most basic form is what you have control over, right?
Right.
The only thing we have control over in our money outlook is how much we make and how much we spend, right?
Yes.
We can't control what the markets do. We can't control necessarily what our employment life is like, because you don't always have control of your own job, and you can't control world events. So when you can control, earning, saving, and spending, that's really where your focus should be. And you're right, it is easy. And, let's be honest, the fact that I could be successful in this industry shows you that the barriers for success aren't super high. But
you.
So but I do think that that where it can get complicated outside of the budget is if you've accumulated a lot of assets. That's where the complication sets in. If it really is about, how much do you earn and how much do you spend, then the financial situation is going to be clear. So back to your point about the budget, and what we tend to do as people is, it's inconvenient to create a budget because you're like thinking, what am I missing?
Right.
The other thing is there's probably 2 or 3 things in your budget category that you might have a little personal shame connected to or worry about.
Right.
So you don't really want to get that real number.
Right.
So the kind of what I always tell people, a budget isn't, like the 10 commandments in stone that you've got to follow for eternity.
Right.
The budget is really about getting you a baseline of saying, is this something I can do? Right. And then I think the other thing too is that make no judgments on what the numbers are. You may have to change them because the resources available from the couple won't support them. But put the real number down. And some key ways to do that is, save all your receipts for 30 days and just write a note on the back of them and everything you do.
That's a great idea. If you're looking to start a divorce, start saving your receipts.
Yeah. Or if you're good with online banking, they categorize all those expenses.
Right.
And you can just data dump that, look at them, look at 3 months. It's probably enough sample size, and just kind of, we have the hardest part about a budget is, you've got the core monthly expenses that don't ever change. Those are easy to identify, right? Then you have those semi-frequent expenses that don't come up all the time. They might be gifts, it might be quarterly taxes, it might be insurance, the things that aren't every month. And then you have kind of the discretionary spending. So I would look at them in those 3 buckets.
Right.
And then you put good numbers around those as best you can, and fight the impulse to overstate or understate. Get the data and just let the data tell you what it is, because when we overstate or understate those numbers, we're imposing our value system on it. And then when you're trying to negotiate within a mediation, this whole idea of spousal maintenance or whatever, if you've made an emotional attachment to what you need and it's not based in a lot of fact, it can be a way that things don't get done.
Right. Okay. So I kind of want to recap a little bit, because I had to write down some things that I heard that really stood out to me. So, and here's the thing, when I have clients in the intake form, there is where they can fill in what they're spending. So it's going to alert you to haircuts and garbage and the things that you might not think of. So that hard part should be kind of taken away too, if there's more outside of their online statement, or if they don't use online banking. But I think too, to also kind of push with clients when they're coming on, that here's a place where you have control, right? So we're going to just take a baseline look at it, but it is the start of you having some control over your life, because you need to see the data to get there. And I loved when you said, make no judgments. Oh, we're so hard on ourselves. Like, if you spend $500 on your hair, you write that down and don't worry. You know what I mean? Because we are hard on ourselves, and that is part of it. And that's not necessary here. This is here to help you. So I love that. And I love the tip. I'm going to start telling people to start saving their receipts if they don't have that online banking. So I think all of that, all the things that you're describing kind of make me feel a little more calm. They've given me some more tips on how I can help my clients, move through this. So is there anything else that you can think of financially that you would like the listeners to hear before we head out? A little last tip about divorce?
I would say, know people around you that you trust, that you think you respect how they handle money, and ask them for advice, ask them for help. It could be they introduce you to a professional that can help, or it can just be a little bit like this conversation, giving you some good reassurance that you'll be able to handle this. It's different and it's new, but ask for help and people will help you. That would be my advice.
I love that you said that, because you have a blog about that.
Yeah.
So, Will, if people want to talk to you about managing their wealth, how can they get a hold of you? And I will put it in the show notes, but let them know where they can find that blog and how they can reach you.
Yeah, great question. I think the best way probably is our phone number is 651-317-4330. But there's two companies. There's Shamrock Wealth Management. You could Google that, and you can look at us there, or the CAIM Divorce Solutions. That's CAIM Divorce Solutions. It's a Celtic term, which is basically a circle of sanctity where people are protected. It's a Celtic word. So they can do it there, and and then they can all the contact information are on those two websites.
Wonderful.
Yeah, and just call anytime if you want. I'd say the biggest thing is I tend to do the phone a lot because I want to hear where people are at. But the website's the best way to do some screening on what we do. Do some screening and maybe make that initial and there's there's an info email that you can send to just, and I get it when you're first kind of looking at this, there's some anonymity that you want to keep. So there's ways to stay a little less obvious. Well, and I just to end this, it's been so fun chatting with you, but truly from the bottom of my toes, I trust you. Oh, thank you. So, whatever that means for the people, for my listeners, you are someone that I find very trustworthy, and I think they would too. So if they were looking for someone, I would highly recommend you. And of course, I use you with my clients. So there you go. Well, I appreciate that. And the same goes back to you. You're just such a wonderful person. One of the reasons at that mediation session where we met, it was very clear to me who the smarter and more graceful person was. So I'm glad we connected. I don't think that's true, Will. You're too humble. But thank you so much for being here. It's so helpful. I have more things to share, and I've learned a lot. So let's do it again sometime. Yeah, let's for sure. Thanks so much, Will. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye. Bye, Lisa. Thanks.